Buddhism's shocking truth. Why life is suffering. Have you ever stopped in silence and tried to observe the world as it truly is? Not as you were told it should be, not as you wish it were, but as it presents itself, bare, raw, unpredictable, impermanent. 1 second, you're laughing. The next, you're drowning in anxiety. Everything changes. Everything slips away. And yet, we keep clinging as if there was something solid, stable, reliable. But what if the very act of clinging is what pulls us under? There's a statement, sharp as a blade, made by Buddhism thousands of years ago. Everything is suffering. Not almost everything. Not only in hard times. Everything. At first, this phrase sounds like a punishment, an existential pessimism, a denial of joy. But is it really? Or does it point toward a freedom so profound that only the courageous dare to see it? I know what you might be feeling right now. Confusion mixed with curiosity. Because somewhere deep inside, something resonates. There's a part of you that knows this is true, even if you can't yet explain why. Welcome to Axiom Sage, a space where the wisdom of the East meets the chaos of the West. And from the meeting, transformation is born. I'm not here to teach you. I'm here to remind you of what your soul has always known, but what the noise of the world has made you forget. Close your eyes for a moment, unless you're driving, of course. Take a deep breath. Release the weight from your shoulders. Listen, not just with your ears, but with the space between your thoughts. Now, I invite you to step in. Step into an understanding that requires no belief, only presence. Because what we're about to explore isn't a religious belief. It's a lens, a way of seeing that can reconfigure everything you understand as reality. A way of seeing born from the heart of Buddhism, crossing centuries, surviving empires, wars, illusions, and passing trends. A way of seeing that says, suffering isn't a mistake. It's the map. Have you noticed how happiness never lasts? That purchase that seemed essential, the dream trip, the new relationship, all bring a spark of pleasure. And right after, the emptiness returns, as if something inside is always hungry, always waiting for more. Why? The answer is uncomfortable, but liberating. Because according to Buddhist teachings, suffering isn't in the world. It's in how we relate to it. It's in our attachment, our aversion, our delusion. We want good things to last forever. We want bad things to never happen. But life doesn't work that way. It changes. It flows. It slips away. And it's precisely there that freedom begins. Suffering isn't a curse. It's a compass. It points with surgical precision to where we're resisting the truth of impermanence. Every time we suffer, it's because, in some way, we've said no to what is. And in that no is born the tension, the conflict, the heaviness. But what if we learn to say yes? Not a resigned yes, but an awakened yes. A yes that sees, understands, and allows. You might be thinking, asterisk, but if I accept everything as it is, won't I become passive? Asterisk, that's the ego's trap. It believes control is strength. But often, true power lies in letting go, in trusting, in seeing that suffering is just the reflection of a self trying to force life into impossible molds. The climax is still to come, and it's not a dramatic explosion, but a sharp silence. A moment of perception that can change everything. Because when you understand, truly understand, what Buddhism means by everything is suffering, you no longer feel fear. You feel lightness. Because you realize suffering isn't the enemy. It's the portal. And that's exactly why this phrase isn't a sentence of sadness. It's a key. Shall we go deeper? I remember the first time I truly saw. Not with my eyes, but with something deeper. An ordinary day. Nothing special. Yet for some reason, in that instant, everything became silent. The inner voices stopped, the demands stopped. And for the first time, I realized I was not at war with the world. I was at war with myself. And everything I called suffering was just the echo of that conflict. In that moment, the phrase, "everything is suffering," transformed. It stopped being a dark verdict on existence and revealed itself as a mirror. A mirror that doesn't accuse, but reveals. Doesn't judge, but awakens. And by looking at it without turning away, I began to see the gears of suffering turning inside me. Attachments, expectations, comparisons, desires disguised as needs, fears fed by the illusion of control. All of it created the pain. It wasn't the world. It was me trying to force the world to align with my projections. And the most ironic part, the harder I fought, the more I suffered. Because anything that resists change is destined to break. The Western mind has been trained to run from pain. We numb it all. With food, social media, shopping, shallow relationships, endless series, distractions. But Buddhism invites something else. It says, look, stay, feel, because suffering has a message. And if you listen to it with courage, it disappears. Like a shadow vanishing when the light comes on. On this path, I learned that emotional pain isn't a mistake. It's an alarm, an invitation to go deeper into your own truth. And each time I accepted that invitation, something in me let go. A tie, a weight, a me I thought was necessary, but that only kept me from breathing freely. Have you ever felt it? That invisible weight you carry? As if you were always trying to prove something, reach something, hold something up? What if I told you that this tension isn't you, but the character you've been taught to play, and that there is something in you that does not suffer, does not resist, that simply is? That's the space Buddhism points to, not toward a dogma, but toward a living silence, a center that remains unshaken, even when everything falls apart. If you feel something stirring inside, a restlessness, a memory, a spark, then this message is for you. And if it resonates, if it makes sense, if it opens even the smallest crack of light, I invite you now, subscribe to the channel. Here, we don't offer ready-made answers. We offer keys, and you decide whether to open the door. Click the button, turn on the bell, and stay with us. Because what comes next may not only change your day, but the way you inhabit your very existence. Now breathe with me. Let go. We are ready to face what no one taught you to look at. Because when you meet suffering with awareness, it dissolves. And in its place, something new arises. A peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. A clarity that cuts like a sword and soothes like the wind. Imagine that every suffering you've ever faced, every pain, every loss, every disappointment were not obstacles, but portals. Each one inviting you to see what's behind, what's beyond. And that now, you are ready to cross the final veil, the illusion of control. Buddhism does not say we must suffer. It says we suffer because we believe in things that aren't real. And here lies the root, the belief that happiness depends on something external, that we will only be complete when something out there aligns with what in here desires. But what if freedom comes precisely when we release that rope? This is the power of this ancient philosophy. It doesn't deny suffering, it redeems it. It honors it as part of the path, not as an enemy, but as a disguised teacher. And that teacher is calling you now, not to punish you, but to wake you up. So, will you dare to look? When Siddhartha Gautama, the prince who would later become the Buddha, decided to leave his palace, he wasn't fleeing wealth, luxury, or comfort. He was fleeing the lie. Because there, among the lush gardens and golden halls, there was an unspoken pact. Don't talk about pain. Don't look at death. Don't acknowledge the inevitable. But one day he saw an old man, a sick man, a corpse, And for the first time, something in his mind cracked. He realized, no matter how much we try to hide, avoid, or deny, we all suffer. And no one, no matter how rich, beautiful, or successful, is immune to time. This realization consumed him and pushed him beyond the palace walls. He sought not just relief, but truth. And after years of wandering, meditating, and emptying himself of everything, he reached something most of us don't even know exists: the cessation of suffering. Not because he eliminated pain, but because he transcended the illusion. It was then that he formulated the foundation of Buddhism, the Four Noble Truths. Simple, direct, as sharp as reality itself. The first, life contains suffering. The second, suffering has a cause. The third, it is possible to end suffering. The fourth, there's a path to do so. This is an abstract philosophy. It's a clinical diagnosis of the soul. He looked at the human mind as a doctor looks at a patient, with compassion but without lies. And what causes suffering? According to him, tanha, a word in Pali meaning craving, thirst, but not ordinary desire. It's the kind of desire that burns, that demands, that makes you believe, if I don't get this, I won't be happy. You've felt this before, haven't you? That inner voice that says, when I have that body, that person, that money, that recognition, then yes, everything will fall into place. But every time you reach it, another goal appears. Then another, and another. It's a cycle, a loop. This craving is fueled by another root: ignorance. Not ignorance as an insult, but as not seeing clearly. We confuse ourselves with our thoughts, with our desires, with our fears. We think we are them. But Buddhism reminds us, you're not what you feel. You are the one who observes. And this is a fundamental point, a pillar. Most people live identified with the content of the mind. But awakening happens when you realize there is something behind the mind, a silent space that never suffers, never clings, never demands. It simply is. It watches. And when you start living from that space, something almost magical happens. Situations still arise, yes. Pain comes. Loss happens. But the difference is, you stop getting lost inside it. You observe, with compassion, with clarity, with presence. The outer world no longer dictates your inner state. And that is freedom. Perhaps now you're starting to understand why Buddhism says everything is suffering. Because as long as we operate from illusion, attachment, and identification, we cannot escape constant pain. It is the side effect of a mind trying to control the uncontrollable. But see, this is not a condemnation. It's a call, a loving alert. Wake up, because when you see the matrix, when you see the gears turning, you can simply step out. Not physically, but internally. This stepping out is not isolation. It is presence. It is living in the world, but not being of the world. It is feeling, but not drowning. It is desiring, but not depending. It is loving without possessing. And at that point, a quiet transformation begins to take place. Your energy shifts. Your mind clears. Your choices become lighter, more conscious. You move closer to what the masters call nirvana. Not a place, but a state. A state where suffering ceases, not because everything is perfect, but because you stop demanding that it be. And that perhaps is one of the most liberating truths a human being can ever touch in this life. There's a subtle moment, almost imperceptible, when suffering transforms. Not because it disappears, but because you shift the place from which you observe it. And in that instant, everything reorganizes itself. The pain is still there, but something within you no longer shrinks, no longer panics, no longer identifies. This is the point where the path splits. Some run back to old patterns, trying once again to numb themselves. Others, perhaps like you, choose to remain. And in remaining, something extraordinary happens. Discernment is born. Modern neuroscience has studied the effects of meditation and mindfulness deeply. It shows that when you train the mind to observe without judgment, your brain's wiring changes. Regions associated with emotional reactivity decrease in activity. Areas linked to compassion and self-regulation expand. Literally, your brain changes when you learn to be present with what is. This isn't magic. It's neuroplasticity. Buddhism knew this thousands of years ago. Today, science is simply confirming what sages intuited in the silence of caves and forests. The mind is trainable. Perception is flexible. And suffering, as real as it feels, is a construction. It all begins with a thought, an inner phrase, an image, a judgment. And if you don't observe it, it takes over. But if you watch the emotion arise and let it move without resistance, it doesn't stick. It passes, like clouds crossing the sky, never touching the sky. When you understand this, freedom stops being a distant ideal and becomes something practical, real, tangible. It doesn't require you to go to the Himalayas. It only requires you to come back to now, because suffering doesn't live in events. It lives in the story you tell about them. The loss of a job can be seen as a catastrophe or as a liberation. A breakup can be felt as rejection or as a reunion with yourself. Death can seem like the end or a return. It all depends on the point of view, on the awareness in your gaze. Buddhism teaches us this with a brutal compassion. As long as you seek stability in the unstable, you will suffer. Because everything changes. Everything is born and dies. Relationships, emotions, identities, bodies, planets, galaxies. The only mistake is believing any of it is permanent. But the beauty is not in denying impermanence. It's in loving it. Imagine if everything lasted forever. Nothing would have value. Nothing would have freshness. Nothing would move us. The fact that everything passes is what gives depth to experience. Someone's smile, a sunset, a hug, a moment of silence. They are precious precisely because they slip through your fingers. And when you accept this, something shifts in your energy field. You stop resisting. Stop fighting invisible battles. Stop clinging to what is already leaving. And in that space, peace emerges, not as the absence of pain, but as full presence with what is. You start living from the inside out, realizing that what you've been seeking outside has always been here, inside you, waiting for your attention. That's why so many Buddhist masters smile softly. They're not oblivious to the world's suffering. They're just no longer trapped in it. And what if I told you that you can get there too? Not overnight, but step by step, breath by breath, awareness by awareness. Each time you choose to be present with what you feel instead of running away, you dissolve a layer of illusion, and suffering gradually loses its grip. You free yourself, not because everything gets better, but because you get better at seeing, and that changes everything. I want you to notice something right now, with great attention. There's a voice inside you. It's talking while you listen to me. It comments, compares, analyzes. It says, this makes sense, or this is exaggerated. It tries to control the experience. But have you realized that this voice is not you? It's part of you, but not your core. The core is silence, space, witness. And the more you watch this voice without trying to silence it, the more it loses control over you. This is real freedom, inner freedom. And this is what Buddhism is about. Not worship, not dogma, but liberation from the conditioned mind. The mind that says, I need this to be happy. The mind that compares your path to others. That demands, judges, insists. The mind that wants everything under control, even knowing nothing ever has been. Picture someone trying to hold water in their hands. The tighter they squeeze, the faster it slips away between their fingers. That's how we live, trying to capture the moment. Hold on to love. Keep youth. Guarantee stability. But everything flows away, because that is the nature of existence. Freedom begins when you stop squeezing and simply let flow. At that point, you stop being the prisoner of the experience and become its observer. You still feel everything, but you're no longer ruled by it. You feel sadness, but you are not sadness. You feel anger, but you are not anger. You see fear, but you don't feed it. It's a spiritual maturity that doesn't come from books or speeches. It comes from presence, from practice, from a decision to stop running. And if you've made it this far, perhaps a part of you is already ready to stop repeating the same cycle, ready to open your mind and heart to something that transcends everything you've been told, ready to awaken. If this resonates, if you feel this truth vibrating deep within you, I invite you once more, subscribe to the channel. This isn't just content, it's a path. And each video, each reflection, each pause is a chance to deprogram the illusion and reconnect with what you truly are. Click now. Turn on notifications. You deserve this space of continuous awakening, because what comes next will take you even deeper. Did you know that most of the thoughts passing through your mind each day aren't even yours? They're reflections of conditioning, other people's words, unprocessed experiences, inherited fears, social pressures, and the scariest part, the more you listen to them, the more you believe you are them. But you're not. You're the space in which these thoughts appear. You're the sky, not the clouds. This distinction changes everything. Buddhism calls this non-self, a concept often misunderstood. It doesn't say you don't exist. It says the you think you are, that identity full of stories, traumas, opinions, roles, is a transient construction, a mask. And when you understand this, pain doesn't disappear, but becomes light. Because you stop taking it personally. You start seeing that everything you've suffered, everything that hurt you, everything that seemed unfair is part of the play. But you are the stage. The stage doesn't shake with the performance. It holds it. It allows it. And when you return to that awareness, you return home. Have you noticed that nothing, absolutely nothing, lasts? Joy explodes and dissolves. Sadness consumes and also fades. Fear traps you, and in an instant it's gone. Seasons change. The body changes. Relationships transform. Thoughts come and go like waves. Even the firmest certainties slip away like sand between your fingers. This is one of Buddhism's pillars, anicca, impermanence. And while it may seem obvious at first glance, we rarely live from this truth. On the contrary, we fight it all the time. We try to freeze the moment, hold on to people, prolong pleasures, prevent losses, as if we could negotiate with time. But time does not negotiate. Have you ever wondered why we suffer so much when we lose something or someone? Because deep down, we believed or wished that would last forever. That love would be eternal, that the good phase would continue, that the young body would never change. But everything changes. Everything, including you. Here's the key. Pain arises when we try to fix what is fluid, when we deny change, when we resist impermanence. Now, imagine for a moment that you no longer resisted, that you welcomed each moment with the awareness that it is unique, irreplaceable, and fleeting. Imagine the power in that, the silent beauty of savoring each glance, each breath, each gesture, knowing it will never happen exactly the same way again. It's not sad, it's sacred. It's like watching a sunset, knowing it will not repeat itself. You don't try to hold it. You simply contemplate, feel, let it move through you. That's how life is meant to be lived. But the mind, conditioned by fear, wants guarantees. It wants to turn flow into structure. the ocean into stone. And in that effort, we drift away from presence. We start living in the past that's gone or the future that never arrives. Suffering, then, is not caused by what happens. It's caused by the refusal to accept what happens. You don't suffer because someone leaves. You suffer because you refuse to accept that people leave. You don't suffer because a chapter ends. You suffer because you insist it should continue beyond what nature allows. You don't suffer because something changed. You suffer because you wanted it not to. Impermanence is the only constant, and paradoxically, it's in it that true peace resides. Because when you stop fighting change, you start flowing with life instead of trying to control it. This doesn't mean resignation. It means wisdom. It means understanding that everything has its time, that the value of experiences lies precisely in the fact that they pass, and that by allowing everything to come and go, you align with the very rhythm of the universe. This understanding shifts your vibration. It moves you from the frequency of fear to the frequency of trust. Trust that even when things fall apart, there's a purpose. Even when you don't understand, there's meaning. Even when it hurts, there's a portal. And perhaps that's why many Buddhist masters say that impermanence is not a problem to be solved, but a truth to be embraced. Because it's what makes everything more precious. The "I love you" said today matters because tomorrow it might not be there. The touch, the look, the presence. Everything gains depth when we accept that it is brief. The mind wants eternity, but the soul wants intensity. An awakening happens when you start living less with the mind and more with the soul. There's a moment, silent, almost imperceptible, when everything you thought was solid begins to crumble. And it's not a destructive collapse. It's a release, as if the entire world had been built on a fragile foundation. And now, with a simple breath of lucidity, the walls begin to fall. You feel the fear. It comes first. The fear of losing who you thought you were. The fear of no longer having the certainties that once protected you. The fear of looking at life without filters, without crutches, without distractions. But just behind the fear, something shines. Something that is not fear. Something that feels like truth. This is the experience of awakening. It's brutal. It's beautiful. It's inevitable when you truly see. Buddhism never promised comfort. It promises clarity. And clarity often hurts because it removes the veil of illusion. It shows you that you spent years, maybe lifetimes, fighting against what could never be controlled, clinging to things that, by their very nature, were destined to disappear. You start to see that relationship that ended needed to end. That loss that felt unbearable taught you more than any book could. That frustration, that anguish, that sense of emptiness, all of it was part of a sacred dismantling. Because you did not come here to be perfect. You came here to be real. And being real takes courage. Courage to see that suffering is not the end, but the beginning. The beginning of a path that takes you inward, to where truth lives, to where silence speaks, to where you no longer need to pretend. Have you noticed how we become experts at pretending? We pretend to be fine. We pretend to know what we want. We pretend to be in control. We pretend we're not afraid. But deep down, we're all trying to find a safe place. An inner refuge. A space where we can simply be without the mask, without the performance. Buddhism points to that place. Not outside, but within. It's always been within. And this is where the shift happens. Because when you understand that everything you were told about success, happiness, identity, purpose was just a story, you stop. You go still, silent. And in that silence, something is born. A state of presence. A kind of love without form. A peace that needs no explanation. A knowing without words. And this knowing says, you were never lost. You were just looking outward. This is where the phrase, "everything is suffering," reveals its true power. It's not a curse. It's the hand that pulls off the blindfold. It says, yes, it hurts, but pain is the portal. Walk through it, don't run away. Because beyond the pain, there is freedom. Beyond resistance, there is surrender. Beyond the ego, there is you, not the conditioned, wounded, anxious you, but the you who observes, the one who remains when everything else falls away. That you does not suffer. It simply sees. And in that seeing, everything heals. Maybe right now you feel a lump in your throat, a tear wanting to fall. Don't fight it. This is your being remembering something it has always known. Something that doesn't come from outside. Something that isn't new. Something that is eternal. You are not the character in the story of pain. You are the awareness watching. And that awareness is free. Not tomorrow. Not after fixing everything. Now, you made it this far. And that is no small thing. Not because of the time you've spent listening to me, but because of everything you've had to walk through inside. You've faced ideas that challenge your logic, allowed dormant memories to surface, questioned certainties, released identifications, and perhaps without realizing it, something in you has already begun to change. Because true awakening isn't loud. It doesn't arrive with thunder or mystical lights. It comes like this, like a breeze, like a pause in the middle of chaos, like a sudden clarity that cuts through confusion like a sharp blade. And it's this clarity that heals us. Everything we've talked about so far, suffering, impermanence, desire, identity, these aren't theories. They're doors. And each one only opens with your presence, your surrender, your willingness to look beyond the surface. Perhaps now, in this moment, you're realizing something deep, that suffering is not an obstacle on your spiritual path. It is the path. That it's not here to punish you. It's here to push you inward, back to the point where you stopped listening to yourself, where you turned away from who you truly are. And that's okay. We've all done this, out of fear, out of survival, out of ignorance. But now you're here, with your soul's eyes a little more open, with your heart a little lighter, with your mind a little quieter. You may not notice, but you're becoming someone else. Someone who feels deeply but doesn't drown. Someone who observes without judging. Someone who understands that every loss carries within it a new possibility for connection. This is the wisdom of emptiness, another core concept in Buddhism. Emptiness is not absence. Emptiness is space. Space for the new. Space for the real. Space for life to dance without hindrance. Imagine your mind as a room, and that this room is full of old furniture piled up for years, beliefs, traumas, memories, other people's voices. There's no space for anything new. But when you begin to empty this room, when you let go, the air comes in. Light enters, and existence can finally breathe inside you. Emptiness is spiritual fertility. It is the ground where freedom grows. You don't need to fill every moment with thoughts. You don't need to solve everything right now. You just need to allow, sit in the center of your being, and let life reveal what needs to be seen. When the Buddha attained enlightenment, he didn't become special. He simply returned to the natural state of being, a state we all carry but forget, a state of silent lucidity, of effortless compassion, of peace that depends on nothing. And you can touch this state, not tomorrow, now. You don't need to be ready. You just need to be present. Do you see what this means? That the end of suffering is not in the future. It's in the way you relate to this moment. And this moment, here, now, is already perfect, even with its imperfections. This is Buddhism's silent revolution. It doesn't invite you to run from the world. It invites you to see the world as it is and still love it. Because liberation doesn't come when pain ends. It comes when you stop running from it. And in this moment, maybe you're ready to stop running. Maybe right now you're feeling a different kind of silence within. It's not the absence of noise. It's the absence of struggle. A place that doesn't demand immediate answers. That doesn't demand you fix yourself. That simply welcomes you as you are. This space has always been there. But maybe, for the first time, you've allowed yourself to rest in it. Without effort, without control, without needing to understand everything. And it's here that true transformation is born. Because real transformation doesn't happen when you learn something new. It happens when you remember what you already knew, but buried under layers of fear, conditioning, and hurry. Suffering forces us to look within. But awakening happens when, upon looking, we find presence instead of guilt, awareness instead of confusion, love instead of judgment. And that shift changes everything. You don't need to be a monk. You don't need to follow rigid rules. You don't need to escape to a temple in the mountains. You only need one commitment, to be honest with yourself. From this moment on, that's all you need to start a new relationship with life. A relationship where suffering is no longer a monster, but a messenger. Where fear no longer paralyzes you, but shows you where you still don't trust. Where impermanence no longer scares you, but teaches you to cherish. This is the invitation, not an ordinary invitation, but a calling from a most authentic part of you. The part that is tired of lies, tired of running, tired of pretending. I don't offer you a ready-made path, but I offer you company. Conscious, lucid, present company. With every video on this channel, you'll find a mirror. Sometimes gentle, sometimes sharp, but always true. Because here, the pursuit is for awakening, not distraction. Here, every word is chosen to reach where the mind cannot, but the soul understands. If something in you moved, if something opened, even slightly, accept that movement. Subscribe now, not as a mechanical gesture, but as a ritual, an inner pact. By clicking that button, you're not just following a channel. You're telling yourself, I choose to remember. I choose to look. I choose to transform. You may not see it yet, but this simple gesture could be the first step in a new cycle of your life. A cycle where pain no longer rules, where guilt no longer dictates your worth, where you stop abandoning yourself and begin to return home. And if you are here now listening to this, it is no accident. You were guided by something greater, by something within, by something that never left you, even in your darkest moments. The voice that brought you here is the same one that will take you forward. So accept, take a deep breath, and come. Your real journey begins now. You may not remember every word you've heard here, but there's something you will remember, the feeling, that subtle vibration that appeared in your chest, that brief shiver, that pause between one thought and another, where for an instant, everything made sense. That is truth moving within you. Not the truth from books or opinions, but the silent truth, the one that needs no defense, the one that simply is. During this journey, you dove into ancient concepts that are still alive, words carrying centuries of wisdom distilled into silence. You touched suffering, but not with fear, with respect. You heard about attachment, craving, desire, and something in you recognized these ghosts as old acquaintances. You heard about impermanence, and maybe for the first time, you didn't want to run from it. You wanted to embrace it. And in that movement, you began to set yourself free. Free from the repeating character. Free from the stories your mind keeps replaying like a broken record. Free from the desperate search for control. Not because you found all the answers, but because you learned to stop asking the wrong questions. The question was never, how do I avoid suffering? It has always been, how do I transform suffering into wisdom? And now you know, you have felt it. The answer is not out there. It's not in others. It's not in the future. It's here, inside, in the space between one breath and the next, in the present moment, in the attentive gaze, in the deep acceptance of what is. You no longer need to fight. You no longer need to pretend. You no longer need to break yourself trying to hold up what is already ready to fall. Let go. Let dissolve. Everything that is not you will fall away. And what remains is sacred. You are the space between forms, the awareness that witnesses, the presence that remains. And no matter how much life continues to bring challenges, pain, loss, now you have an anchor, an axis, a silence, a knowing. And that knowing will not abandon you. It's with it that you will move through the world with more lightness. It's with it that you will love without fear. It's with it that you will suffer, but not drown. It's with it that you will always remember that everything passes, except what you truly are. And maybe sometime from now, in another moment of your life, this memory will return. Perhaps on a hard day, perhaps in the middle of an unexpected laugh. And when it returns, you will smile. You will breathe. You will recognize that which seemed like suffering was my rebirth. You're still here. And that means everything. It means that something in you recognized, felt, aloud. It wasn't just words. It was an encounter. And true encounters never end. They continue even in silence. Even when the screen goes dark. Even when life distracts you again with its noise and demands. But now, something in you has changed. You know it. And even if tomorrow everything seems the same, the work, the responsibilities, the same voices out there, something inside is different. A subtle clarity, a new ground, a sense that, despite everything, there is something in you that no longer needs to run. This is revolution, because the greatest revolution does not happen in the streets, in books, or in grand ideas. The greatest revolution happens when someone, in silence, chooses to sit with themselves, to stay, to look, to listen. And today you did that. You gave yourself this time, this dive, this pause. You looked at suffering. Instead of shrinking, you remained. You looked at impermanence, and instead of despairing, you breathed. You looked at yourself, and instead of judging, you embraced. And that is more than enough. The path of liberation is not a ladder you climb. It's a remembrance you deepen. It's like diving into an ocean. The more you let go of control, the deeper you sink, and the more you find yourself. So don't worry about understanding everything. Don't pressure yourself for still feeling pain. Don't think you have to be at peace all the time. Awakening is not linear. It's a spiral. Sometimes you move forward. Sometimes it feels like you go back. But in truth, you're just peeling away another layer, going deeper. And with each layer that falls, you shine brighter. You no longer need to search outside for what has always lived within. You no longer need to beg for love, attention, validation. You already are. You always have been. Suffering brought you here. But now, you choose what to do with it. You can use it as weight, or you can turn it into wings. And if you've made it to the end, I know which choice you've made. And know this, you are not alone. Others are awakening too, slowly, silently. And every time someone chooses to look within, the entire world transforms, even if no one notices. You just taken that step. And from now on, nothing is the same. Have you ever stopped to feel, not think, not analyze, feel what happens inside you when you stop running? When you drop the weight of expectations? When you stop chasing other people's love? When you cease trying to prove something? When you finally rest within yourself? Feel it now. That light space that opens between one breath and the next. That's it. That's space. That non-place. That's where life happens. You spent too much time trying to find yourself in forms, in achievements, in relationships, in the stories told about who you should be. But now, perhaps for the first time, you're feeling who you are without any of that. You are the silence that watches everything pass without needing to defend itself. You are the presence that remains, even when everything falls apart. You are the awareness that recognizes suffering is not punishment. It is direction. It's life's finger pointing to where you are betraying yourself, where you're saying yes when it should be no, where you still haven't allowed yourself to be truthful. And when you see that, something disarms. There's no more need to resist. You no longer need to conquer pain. You need to move through it with presence. Buddhism does not promise you a life without pain, but it shows you that pain no longer needs to become suffering. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Pain comes from life. Suffering comes from attachment. When you let go, you suffer less. When you accept, you flow more. When you align, the universe dances with you, not against you. Maybe now you feel your body lighter, or maybe not. Maybe there's still a weight inside, and that's okay. What matters is that now you're looking at it with new eyes. You're no longer a victim of pain. You are a witness, and witnessing is the first step to transmutation. Neuroscience has already proven when you observe your emotion with presence, the brain activates different networks. The body regulates, hormones balance, and energy reorganizes. It's not just spiritual, it's biological. Awareness heals. That's why what you're doing here now is not small. You're teaching your whole system to stop running. You're training your soul to return to your body. You are reintegrating into what you have always been. And in that return lives the true miracle. You realize you don't need to be perfect. You don't need to eliminate every flaw. You don't need to become someone else. You only need to remember. Remember what you felt just now. Remember that everything passes. Remember that there's a center in you that never suffers, never fears, never loses. It is in that center that peace lives. And that peace now has already begun to inhabit you. You may not remember every single word you've heard here, but there's something you will remember, the feeling, that subtle vibration that rose in your chest, that brief shiver, that pause between one thought and another, when for an instant everything made sense. That is truth moving within you. Not the truth from books, nor from opinions, but the silent truth, the one that needs no defense, the one that simply is. Throughout this journey, you dove into ancient yet living concepts, words carrying centuries of wisdom distilled into stillness. You touched suffering, not with fear, but with respect. You heard about attachment, craving, desire, and something in you recognized these ghosts as old acquaintances. You heard about impermanence, and perhaps, for the first time, you didn't want to run from it. You wanted to embrace it. And in that movement, you began to become free. Free from the repeating character. Free from the stories the mind insists on replaying like a scratched record. Free from the desperate chase for control. Not because you found all the answers, but because you learned to stop asking the wrong questions. The question was never, how do I avoid suffering? But rather, how do I turn suffering into wisdom? And now you know, you felt it. The answer isn't out there. It's not in others. It's not in the future. It's here, inside, in the space between one breath and the next, in the present moment, in the attentive gaze, in the deep acceptance of what is. You no longer need to fight. You no longer need to pretend. You no longer need to break yourself trying to hold up what is already ready to fall. Let go. Let it dissolve. Everything that is not you will fall away. And what remains is sacred. You're the space between forms, the awareness that watches, the presence that remains. And even though life will keep bringing challenges, pains, losses, now you have a point of anchor, an axis, a stillness, a knowing, and that knowing won't abandon you. It's with it that you'll walk through the world more lightly. It's with it that you'll love without fear. It's with it that you'll suffer, but without sinking. It's with it that you'll remember always that everything passes except who you truly are. And maybe sometime from now, in another moment of your life, this memory will return. Perhaps on a hard day, perhaps in the middle of unexpected laughter. And when it returns, you'll smile, you'll breathe, you'll recognize what once felt like suffering was my rebirth. You're still here, and that means everything. It means something in you has recognized, has felt, has allowed. It wasn't just words. It was an encounter, and true encounters never end. They go on, even in silence, even when the screen goes dark, even when life distracts you again with its noises and demands. But now, something in you has changed. You know it. And even if tomorrow everything looks the same, the work, the responsibilities, the same voices out there, something inside is different. A subtle clarity, a new ground, a sense that despite everything, there's something in you that no longer needs to run. That is revolution. Because the greatest revolution doesn't happen in the streets, in books, or in grand ideas. The greatest revolution happens when someone, in silence, chooses to sit with themselves, to stay, to look, to listen. And today, you did that. You gave yourself this time, this dive, this pause. You looked at suffering, and instead of shrinking, you stayed. You looked at impermanence, and instead of despairing, you breathed. You looked at yourself, and instead of judging, you welcomed. And that is more than enough. The path of liberation is not a ladder you climb. It's a remembering you deepen. It's like diving into an ocean. The more you release control, the deeper you go, and the more you find yourself. So don't worry about understanding everything. Don't pressure yourself for still feeling pain. Don't think you need to be at peace all the time. Awakening is not linear. It's a spiral. Sometimes you move forward. Sometimes it feels like you go back. But in truth, you're just peeling away another layer, going deeper. And with every layer that falls, you shine brighter. You no longer need to search outside for what has always lived within. You no longer need to beg for love, attention, validation. You already are. You always have been. Suffering brought you here. But now, you choose what to do with it. You can use it as weight, or you can turn it into wings. And if you made it to the end, I know which choice you made. And know this, you're not alone. Others are awakening too, slowly, quietly. And each time someone chooses to look within, the whole world changes, even if no one notices. You just took that step, and from this moment on, nothing is the same. Have you ever stopped to feel, not think, not analyze, feel what happens inside you when you stop running? When you release the weight of expectations? When you stop chasing other people's love? When you end the need to prove something? When you finally rest within yourself? Feel it now. That gentle space opening between one breath and another. That's it. That's space. That no place. That's where life happens. You spent too long trying to find yourself in forms, in achievements, in relationships, in the stories you were told about who you should be. But now, for the first time, you may be feeling who you are without any of that. You are the silence that watches it all pass without needing to defend itself. You are the presence that remains, even when everything falls apart. You are the awareness that recognizes suffering is not punishment. It is direction. It is life's finger pointing to where you're betraying yourself, where you're saying yes to what should be no, where you still haven't allowed yourself to be true. And when you see that, something softens. There's no longer a need to resist. You no longer need to defeat pain. You need to move through it with presence. Buddhism doesn't promise you a life without pain, but it shows you that pain no longer has to be suffering. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Pain comes from life. Suffering comes from attachment. When you let go, you suffer less. When you accept, you flow more. When you align, the universe dances with you, not against you. Maybe now your body feels lighter. Or maybe not. Maybe there's still a weight inside. And that's okay. What matters is that now you're looking at it with new eyes. You are no longer a victim of pain. You are a witness. And witnessing is the first step to transmuting. Neuroscience has already proven when you observe your emotion with presence, the brain activates different networks. The body regulates. Hormones stabilize. Energy reorganizes. It's not just spiritual, it's biological. Awareness heals. That's why what you're doing here right now is not small. You're teaching your whole system to stop running. You're training your soul to come back into the body. You're reintegrating with what you've always been. And in that return lives the true miracle. You realize you don't need to be perfect. You don't need to eliminate every flaw. You don't need to become someone else. You only need to remember. Remember what you felt just now. Remember that everything passes. Remember that there is a center in you that never suffers, never fears, never loses. It's in that center that peace lives. And that peace has already begun to inhabit you. Look deep within yourself right now. Without forcing, without rushing. Just observe. What has stayed? What remains in you? Even after everything that's been said, there's a gentle echo, maybe a strange calm, maybe an urge to cry without knowing why, maybe a desire to stay silent for hours. That's the frequency. That's the place where real transformation begins. And from here, I have a request for you. But it's not an ordinary request. It's a soul-to-soul request. If this content touched something in you, if an old memory awoke, if a pain was welcomed, if an emptiness began to glow, then I invite you to subscribe. But not like someone pressing a button, like someone making a vow, like someone saying to themselves, I choose to remember, because this channel is not just another one. It is a subtle space of reconnection. Each video is a mirror, each word a key. And when you subscribe, you're not just receiving content. You're saying, I allow myself to continue. Yes, to continue. To continue on this path of not going back to sleep, of not losing yourself again in the distractions of the world, of not forgetting what you began to remember here. You may get lost, yes, but now there's a thread, a compass, a vibration reminding you that you are not fear, not the past, not the pain. You're the one who watches. And if something in you wants to keep watching with awareness, subscribe. Not for me, for you. Now breathe, because what I'm about to tell you now, few have the courage to face. Have you noticed that at many moments in your life, even surrounded by people, you felt alone? Even laughing, something inside felt empty. Even loving, something felt missing. Even achieving, something never quite filled you. That emptiness is not a flaw. It is sacred. It is a space within you that nothing in the world can fill. Because it's not there to be filled. It's there to remind you that you came from something greater. And that this remembrance is the only thing that will truly complete you. Buddhism calls this your Buddha nature. The awakened essence that lives in all beings. It is there, in you, no matter what you've done. No matter where you failed. It doesn't get stained. It doesn't break. It doesn't get lost. It only waits. Waits for you to stop. Waits for you to listen. Waits for you to return. And now, maybe you've returned. Even if only for an instant. Even if only in part. And that is already everything. Have you ever heard the sound of a tree growing? No, because it doesn't make noise. But it happens. Slowly. Invisibly. Deeply. That's how you are changing. While you listen, while you feel, while you breathe with more attention. Your being is reorganizing from the inside out. like the roots of a tree that reach downward before any branch rises. The suffering that once felt like a crack may now start to feel like a sacred fissure, an opening through which light enters, a gap where the real can finally seep in. Buddhism doesn't invite us to be good. It invites us to be true, to look at what is, even if it hurts, to recognize where we are stuck, where there is still attachment, where illusion still exists. And by doing this, something collapses, but something else begins to blossom, something that requires no effort, no merit, something that simply sprouts when the soil is clear. You're that soil, and every tear shed in silence, every sigh, every truth you allowed yourself to feel, all of this has been watering the earth. Now, the seeds are awakening. And no, you don't need to do anything more. Just keep allowing, keep feeling, keep being present. That's the difference between seeking enlightenment and becoming one with it. You don't reach awakening. You simply stop blocking what has always been there. You don't become enlightened on top of a mountain, but when you stop running from the darkness inside. And in doing so, you start to see that even suffering has light. Even a void pulses. Even pain loves, because everything is part of it. Everything carries a spark of the divine, even what you once thought you had to reject. And when you include everything, even pain, what was once a battlefield becomes a temple. A sacred temple with no victories, no defeats. Only presences, only silences that heal. Only an inner yes to what is. In that moment, you align with the deepest frequency of existence. You return to being part of the whole, not as someone trying to control reality, but as someone who dances with it. This dance doesn't require perfect steps. It only asks for surrender. And surrender begins like this, with you listening, with you pausing, with you breathing just as you are right now. In this instant, you don't need to be anything more. Not calmer, not wiser, not more awakened. You only need to be, and that being is already presence. It's already healing. It's already an eternal step toward what you never lost, only forgot. Have you ever felt homesick for something you've never lived? A silent calling, not toward a geographic place, but toward a state of being, as if there were a dormant memory in your soul whispering, there is something more. Something beyond fear, beyond the mind, beyond the story you repeat every time you look in the mirror. That something is you. You before the name, before the pain, before the separation. Buddhism points to that place, but cannot be explained. It can only be lived. And what you are feeling right now may be that living. You don't need to understand it clearly or put it into words. You just need to feel this gentle warmth, this expansion, this full emptiness, this peace that doesn't depend on any logic. This is you returning to you. It is consciousness recognizing itself as consciousness, without effort, without noise, without drama, just presence. Suffering may still exist, yes, but now you know it doesn't define you. It is part of the game of form, but you're not the form. You are the space. The silence where everything happens. And when you become the silence, even chaos respects you. See, pain is intense, but it is never permanent. Fear screams, but it always loses power before truth. The mind doubts, but the heart knows. And now, perhaps, your heart is saying something. Not with words, but with a sweet, unshakable certainty. I can trust. You can trust the flow. You can trust impermanence. You can trust what burns, because fire only burns what is false. And when all illusion is consumed, what remains is your essence. Luminous, unshakable, untouchable. This is the climax. Not an explosion of understanding, but a state of living stillness. A lucidity that shines from deep within your eyes. A surrender that doesn't weaken, but frees. You have arrived here. And even if the world pulls you back, Even if routine shouts, even if emotions shake you again, something inside you will never be the same. That part of you has seen, and once it sees, it cannot unsee. Now breathe, feel. Everything that needed to be said has been said, but what truly matters is not in the words. It's in the space between them, in the silence that remained after, in the place within you that now recognizes that you are no longer the same. Maybe you can't explain it. Maybe you don't even know what has changed, but you feel it deep down, like an underground river that began to flow without anyone seeing. That's how true transformation happens. It makes no noise. It needs no announcement. It moves like the wind, invisible yet undeniable. And now you are inside this current, not as a passenger, but as part of it. You are the flow. You are the breath. You are the silence. You are the sacred pause between a life of illusion and an awakening that begins now. And if, for a moment, you forget, that's okay. Life will remind you, with a glance, with a loss, with a touch, with the next breath. Because after today, you are not completely asleep anymore. You have awakened, even if partially, even if only inside. And that is sacred. Everything said here did not come from the outside. It was only the mirror reflecting what has always been within. Suffering, which once frightened you, is now a portal. Impermanence, which once hurt you, is now beauty. The void, which once confused you, is now home. And if you ever need to return, return. This channel is a moving temple. Each video is a bell resonating in your soul. Each word, a gentle reminder. You are on the path, not to become something, but to let go of everything that took you away from who you've always been. So, before you go, feel this moment, not just as someone who listens, but as someone who consecrates. Close your eyes if you can. Feel your body. Feel the ground. Feel life inhabiting you again. Now, more than ever, you don't need to chase anything, because what you were seeking has already found you. Subscribe. Stay. Return whenever you need. This space is yours. And what has been open here does not close. Because truth, once touched, does not disappear. It only goes quiet and watches you from within. And so, with reverence, we meet again in the next instant of clarity. Deep gratitude for existing, for listening, for feeling, and for remembering that all of this was only the beginning.